Hello, Friday morning breakers and shakers. It's Friday the 16th of July and we're live on Teachers Talk Radio. I'm your host today, Dorian Brown, and we're going to be exploring the International Baccalaureate. Joining me for discussion will be Ian McHugh, an experienced IB coordinator working in international schools. We also hope to have some questions and comments from you on the phone or via the text.
This is Teachers Talk Radio and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
So last day for many of us, another week for the rest. A warm welcome to you all, and thank you for joining us this Friday break time on Teachers Talk Radio. Good start. I'm Dorian Brown, and I'm absolutely
love stationery, right? Imagine
absolutely honoured to have been given the opportunity to host a show for Teachers Talk Radio. With this being my debut, already there has been some inevitable technical difficulties, but I also do apologise in advance for the excessive use of the word Our topic, as I said in the intro today, is the International Baccalaureate, and I'm hoping to be able to draw some parallels and comparisons with the A-level programme here in the UK. So please do feel free to call in, text, or at any point. We'd love to hear about your experiences and or questions that you might have with the topic. You can also tweet us here at TTRadio 2021 using the hashtag TTRadio, and I'll also paste my guest and my Twitter handle in the show text box. So globally, the International Baccalaureate, or IB, is offered by over 5,000 schools in about 150 different countries globally. Now, only about 100 of those programs are offered in the UK. My guest today is Ian McHugh, who's an experienced teacher of history and theory of knowledge, and he's had over 20 years of experience in no less than 8 different countries. Ian's worked as an IB coordinator in China, the USA, and currently in Qatar. And I hope to tap into his experience, thoughts, and reflections of what it is to be a teacher and leader of the IB diploma program. So welcome, Ian. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us today.
No worries. Thanks for having me, Dorian.
Would you mind kicking us off by giving us a brief outline? We'll probably have a mixture of listeners at this moment in time, some that would have heard of the IB before, some probably may never have heard of the IB before. So could you just kick us off by giving us a brief outline of what the IB is?
Yeah, sure. The IB is an international education provider. It was formed in 1968 in Geneva. It's a non-profit organization, and it offers 4 educational programs. So it begins with the primary years program, also known as the PYP, which begins from 3 and goes all the way up to 11 and 12 years. The middle years program, which is the MYP, which goes from 11 to 16, which is traditionally the UK secondary school. The diploma program, the one that kick-started the IB provision way back in the late 1960s, and that's for post-16, so that's the 16 to 18, 19 bracket pre-university, and very, very recently, the career-related program was also initiated from 2012. That provides a vocational route to university for post-16, or indeed into kind of the world of work. The guiding principle, I guess, from the IB is that it kind of came out of the International School of Geneva, which is, I think it's the world's oldest international school, and the work of kind of Marie-Therese Mauret, who was a big French educational advocate in the 30s, 40s, and then into the 50s. And it was very much a reaction to the turmoil and kind of division that had been created out of World War II. It started off with high ideals, but it also started off with the idea of a pragmatic approach to international communities, and the need to get a qualification that was accepted across the world from those students who, for whatever reason, found themselves in an international school environment. And yet, despite their best efforts, weren't necessarily recognised for their efforts in universities across the world. So there was a driving force of pragmatism and idealism over the 1960s. The 1950s and 60s that kind of came to fruition in the formulation in 1968. The program then kind of went from strength to strength in the 1970s and 80s, spreading to the Americas and to the Asia Pacific region. In the 1990s, the PYP and MYP were added to kind of make sure that it wasn't just the post-16 qualification. And as I mentioned before, from 2012 onwards, the career-related program was put in as a post-16 kind of vocational route into the world of work or into university places.
Wow, great. Okay, so that's a fantastic history, I think, of the program. And having taught it myself for 8 years as well, I believe the mission statement is really important here. As there's been an increase in global interactions, I agree with what you said really about the need for this kind of educational program, which takes into account the globalization of the world. So I've got the mission statement here, and I will put it in the text box below, but I just wanted to read it out for our listeners as well. So the mission statement is: the International Baccalaureate aims to develop inquiring, knowledgeable, and caring young people who help to create a better and more peaceful world through intercultural understanding and respect. To this end, the organisation works with schools, governments and international organisations to develop challenging programmes of international education and rigorous assessment. These programmes encourage students across the world to become active, compassionate and lifelong learners who understand that other people with their differences can also be right. So an awful lot to unpack in those three kind of relatively short statements there. Some very bold and ambitious statements of intent found within there as well. So on a more practical level then, if I can ask you, having taught in IB schools, I think for now, is it 12 years you've taught in IB schools, Ian?
Yeah, that's right.
Right now, how does that mission statement, all of those things in the statement there, how do they interact with day-to-day teaching and administration of the IB?
I think from my role as an IB coordinator, I think there's two things to say. There's an onus on any kind of leadership position in a school to kind of have an element of administration linked to it, and obviously the kind of the administration, correct delivery of the courses is part of my remit as an IB coordinator, as it is for all IB coordinators. I think where it kind of slightly differs as well, and this links to the idea of the IB mission statement, is that it's also a kind of guiding principle for the kind of pedagogical delivery of the IB diploma program and the IBCP or the PYP or the MYP. And in that vein, I think there's two elements to this. There's the approaches to teaching and learning, which the IB kind of promote as part of the manifestation of that IB mission and ethos, and there's also the learner profile traits. So there was some really, really good stuff written a few years ago on, I think he's an assistant principal in perhaps Thailand now, or he used to be in Paris, but a guy called Joe Holroyd. He's got a great post on LinkedIn, which I'm pretty sure is publicly accessible, but the idea of making sure that the learner profile traits are manifested and visible leads into that mission and ethos. So one of the guiding principles for the traits that we're trying to promote in IB diploma program and IB courses students are these kind of particular 10 traits that all of our students must have. So it might be worth kind of running through them, that they need to be balanced and caring, principled, they need to be open-minded, they need to be good communicators, they need to be knowledgeable, they need to be good thinkers, reflective, inquirers. I think I've mentioned risk takers, and all of those things kind of underpin the ethos and mission that you've just outlined. I think it's important that whilst there's a visibility of those things on the walls of my school and on the walls of the classrooms, and indeed they should be visible, and indeed they should be kind of articulated and discussed in kind of curriculum documentations and accreditations documents. They've got to also appear in kind of regular everyday life and regular everyday lessons. So with the learner profile traits, I can speak personally to the idea of, that mission is manifested in a focus on a particular trait of a week, which allows awareness from both staff and students to kind of reward things that go beyond the curriculum on a weekly basis. We have in my school kind of awards which are linked to those particular traits, which are given on a half-termly basis, and again that raises the profile of those. And also particularly in kind of, my daily life, if you like, as a history teacher, then I think articulating it and working it into your schemes of learning is really, really important. So as a history teacher, one of the things that I deliver is a module on kind of Genghis Khan for the IB history topic as a military leader, and once we've covered all of the topics, once we've covered all of the knowledge, if you like, that we need to focus upon, one of the tasks that I set my students is to reflect on Genghis Khan, the military leader, and then kind of link something to the learner profile trait. So we can ask, can you find an example of him being a risk taker? Can you find an example where he was particularly caring? Obviously, Genghis Khan is not necessarily known well for his kind of caring nature. Can you think of a time when he communicated well and obviously kind of united Mongolian tribes and things like that? And that really, really brings it to the fore in the lessons. In terms of kind of the day-to-day delivery of curriculum, we've also got the approaches to teaching and learning, or kind of, and they underpin the delivery, and kind of focus upon the idea of kind of transdisciplinarity, and the idea that some of these things will transcend subjects. It's not to say that the knowledge in those subjects isn't important. That's obviously the driver, and it kind of conveys most of the message, but it is important to talk about the idea that there are some things that go across and above and beyond subjects and almost kind of transcend international borders as well. So that these things kind of underpin all IB World schools and anybody delivering the program.
Fantastic, thanks for that, Ian. Yes, and I love that idea of taking the, when it wasn't Mary Myatt that said it, I can't remember who it was off the top, but she has sort of quoted the idea of ideals and vision being lived and not laminated, and I think you've articulated really well. I love the idea that going from the almost abstract of what are the learner profile attributes, and then actually trying to attach that, trying to get students to recognize those attributes within people of history. So I think that's a really, really nice way of explaining and getting students to kind of understand what it is to be caring, what it is to be a good communicator, etc.
Yeah, and definitely as well, the idea of kind of any being part of an IB School World Network means that this is kind of articulated for us. But every single school in the world has got some form of kind of mission or traits that or learning outcomes that they're looking to promote in their students. And I think just occasionally making that not just kind of visible on the classroom walls, but also kind of visible in curriculum and very, very clear and explicit occasionally in some lessons allow students to reflect on those things. With the ATLs in particular, there's kind of 5 guiding approaches to learning on something like kind of thinking or on social skills. And actually what social skills mean is kind of, it's about kind of collaboration and working effectively with others. So it's not necessarily a driver to what we're doing, but it's very, very useful, I think, to be aware of getting that kind of balance across the articulation of your curriculums, but also as a day-to-day teacher, kind of, reflecting when there is group work or where there's kind of, peer discussion or whatever taking place in the classroom, and making sure that people are aware that working effectively with others is a skill that should be practiced, and it should be manifested, and it also should be celebrated when it's done well.
Yeah, and leading to that, I think, and this is a question I think back to you for that is, do you feel, or do you in your practice, do you actually teach those skills explicitly? As they are kind of laminated and put on the wall, do you explicitly teach group work, teamwork, etc., or does that come through in the disciplines themselves and the subjects themselves?
I think that kind of it's an amalgam of both. There's a supporting kind of, if you like, we have our IB core lessons, and I'm very, very lucky at my school that we're given designated time for that. I know it's not the case in all. In all schools, and I know sometimes it can kind of sometimes be incorporated into maybe a PSHCE module or that kind of directed kind of tutor time that students have got. I think on a day-to-day basis, it's just about the raising awareness of it, and obviously kind of within lessons, then it's making sure that some of the best attributes are kind of reflected on. So we of course do lessons on what would be classed as an ATL under something like self-management, which is organization skills, and obviously post 16 we've got to provide some scaffolding for our students about how to potentially manage their time and their task effectively, but making sure that as an IB coordinator, then that's clear and the expectations are clear. Then students can find their own way after those prompts are given. I wouldn't say that it's explicitly given specific time in certain lessons. In terms of kind of the self-management skills that come through on the ATL, then what you're doing is kind of considering and reconsidering the process of your own learning, if you like. So making sure that you're aware of which skills you're particularly good at, and which maybe you need to work upon to ensure that the knowledge that you've picked up in lessons is deployed to the best of your ability. So yes. As an example, something like kind of research skills on the ATL is about media literacy and information literacy. And in my history lessons, I'm lucky enough to teach a lot about medieval kind of Islamic civilizations and things like the Abbasid and Fatimid kind of caliphates. And we use a really, really good YouTube website, which you should all kind of check out, which is by a guy called Sayawish, and he's a Pakistani national. And he puts out something under Al Muqaddimah on YouTube, and it's various YouTube videos about the history of the Islamic kind of civilizations. And within there, the interaction that my post-16 students have with that media, the idea that we use those things to kind of create ideas and obviously kind of gain information and gain knowledge, and also the idea that we can apply to the interpretation and make a judgment about that as a historical source is very, very useful. So in my case, I'll make it explicit which ATL we're particularly focusing on in a lesson, whether that's on a slide on a presentation, or whether that's in the Teams or the online guidance that we're given, or whether that's just written on the board, if that's the kind of the case may be. And it just kind of raises that awareness. So it's certainly not a substitute to knowledge, but I think it does enhance the thinking that's going on in the classroom about how they're approaching knowledge.
Yes, perfect. And FOD3 has texted in as well, actually, and she's agreed and said it's really good. But that, rather than looking at these words, there's this tendency or propensity in education to have these laminated words and these ideals, etc., kind of stuck up on the wall, but actually not embedded, as FOD3 says, and saying that's quite a fundamental part of the program. Listen, Ian, we've covered a lot, but I do still think that we've sort of barely scratched the surface in terms of the structure of the IB and a few other things that I'd like to talk about. We've also got a couple of texts coming in as well with some questions, which I'll refer to shortly. I'm going to take a quick break to start with, and then I'm going to come back and ask for your your experience as a diploma program coordinator. So we'll be back after the break.
Every teacher loves stationery, right? Imagine getting a selection of fun, beautiful and unique stationery items designed and selected especially for teachers, delivered through your door every month. You need to check out teacherslovestationery.club.
I'm always so excited when the box arrives. It's such a treat.
My Teachers Love Stationery Club box is just a little treat to myself every month.
It's always full of delightful and surprising items, including some really good quality stationery brands like Faber-Castell and Stabilo.
And because you never know what you're going to get, it makes it even more fun and special when you get it.
It feels really great to be supporting a family business that's run by real teachers. I can't help feeling like they just know what I'm going to enjoy using stationery-wise better than I do myself.
Visit teacherslovestationery.club and enter the code TTRadio when you buy your first stationery box to save £2 today. teacherslovestationery.club.
Welcome back. And if you've just joined us, it's 9:20 GMT. I'm Dorian Brown, and I'm joined by my guest Ian McHugh, who've been having a fascinating discussion about all things IB. Before the break, Ian gave us an insight into the purpose of the IB and broke down what the IB learner profile and the ATLs, or the approaches to learning, look like on the factory floor. Now, as Ian's expertise lies in the coordination of the diploma program, that's the Key Stage 5, 16 to 19-year-olds, we're going to take a bit of time now just to look at what the educational experience would be for a typical IB DP student. I've got a couple of questions, as I said, which I'd like to kind of crowbar in at some point, and I'm sure that we will be able to do that. So I wanted to just very quickly start by asking Ian to give us an idea of how the diploma program itself is structured.
Okay, well, post 16, the students are full time. Is made up of a diploma program core, which is made up of 3 elements, and also 6 different subject groups. So the IB diploma program core is made up of something called creativity, activity, and service. That's commonly referred to as CAS. There's also a course called the Theory of Knowledge, which I'm very, very lucky to be able to teach. That's sometimes kind of referred to as TOK. And the students also have to do an extended essay. And obviously that's sometimes kind of shortened to extended essay or EE. So you've got CAS, TOK, and the EE as the core elements. On top of that, you've got 6 different subject groups. So the first one, language A, is very much for first language speakers. Remember, the international baccalaureate program is designed for an international context, but it's also designed for kind of this international mindedness. So language plays a large part of the delivery of the courses. So the first language, language A, is designed for the mother tongue of the particular student. The second group, language acquisition, is designed for students to pick up almost their second language and study that to a good standard, but also kind of to be able to acquire that standard of language. It's not the idea that you're a fluent speaker in a second language to be able to access that. So you study a second language as part of it. Group 3 is called individuals and societies. within there are 10 different subject areas. So individuals and societies kind of focuses on human experience and behavior and the environment in which people live, both physical and economic and social, and also to a certain extent the history of the cultural and social institutions in there. So that's where I'm kind of got most experience of. So my subject history kind of falls within group 3. In group 4, you've got sciences, and again there's 7 different science subjects. So there's the common 3 of biology, chemistry, and physics. There's also computer sciences that fall in there. Design and technology falls in there. Sports, exercise, and health sciences, which is kind of sports science or PE, I guess, post 16. And then there's something called ESS, which is environmental systems and societies, and they all fall within that remit. You've got mathematics as group 5, and then you've got in group 6, you've got the arts and what we call electives. So the arts can include visual arts, theatre studies, and film, and also it's an opportunity in that group 6 subject to choose or to maybe kind of increase specialism in terms of an elective. So if you're required to do 2 sciences, then you can deploy a second choice there. If you're required or kind of perhaps you have a propensity for something like a humanities subject, then you can you can study those there. And then the final thing to say is from those 6 subjects in the core, students have to choose 3 higher level subjects, which is ultimately the guiding and the foundations, the key pillars of their diploma program, and they'll study those for 240-ish instructional hours, and then they also have to choose 3 standard level subjects, which are around about 150 hours. So there's a 90-hour difference between the higher level subjects that a student chooses and the standard level subjects that a student chooses.
Great, and I love the idea that so each of the 6 groups there, a second language is mandatory, right? So you have to learn a second language, and we know the benefits of learning languages at an early age. I'm going to bring in the text that we received from Ollie Roberts here. He got a couple of questions there, but the first question kind of pinged with me as it was. I read something very recently. His question was, I wanted to ask Ian whether Ian might have an opinion on whether the IB may not necessarily benefit students that struggle academically. He teaches A-level maths, and this kind of goes with something which I saw on a careers website aimed at students, and it was it was disadvantages of IB, and the bullet point said, to pass the IB, there's no choice but to work hard.
I would suggest that kind of any teacher listening who teaches anybody post 16, or for that matter, kind of any teacher who's listening who teaches any student, knows that in order to do well, students have to work hard. I do agree that the IB diploma program does require kind of a level of academics, but I don't think that's in any way different to any kind of post 16 qualification, whether that's A-levels in the UK or kind of advanced placement in the US or kind of domestic baccalaureates in Europe. I think the way in which you approach it as an IB coordinator is very much to kind of celebrate the successes. So I've been lucky in my time as coordinator to have students who have received the highest score on the IB diploma program, which is 45 points. One thing I perhaps should have mentioned before is that the grading for the IB is on a 1 to 7 basis, and therefore kind of 6 subjects out of with a possible 7 score makes it up to 42, and then the DP core gives you another 3 core points available, so the top score is 45. And I've had those students, and they're memorable and they're exceptional and they're wonderful, and they've gone on to study in the best universities in the world. I also think it's important that you celebrate the successes of students who gain the diploma and score kind of 24 points. We're very, very lucky. 10 days ago, the IB results for the 2021 examination session were released to us, and there's a couple of students who were on that borderline kind of 23, 24, 25 threshold, which which is a big difference for achieving the diploma. European universities require 24 points and the acquisition of the diploma to get in most cases. And I think seeing some students work incredibly hard to get 24 points is as much as of a reward than the students that we have kind of this year who have got in the 40-point scores, or I've had in the past that have got the top score, that kind of go on and quite rightly be lauded. I think in some cases, you know, the different students can be celebrated in different ways. So I do agree that there's an academic element to it, and I think that's maybe what prompted the IB in 2012 to kind of look at that kind of maybe that reduced academic but kind of perhaps more vocational route in the career related program, and put that again in there post 16. But I think all of the research coming out of the IB career related program, it was unsuspected from the IB, which is that most people kind of taking on that are going to universities as well. So I think they thought that it might be a vocational route post 16 into the world of work, and that's not necessarily being manifested in the graduates that are now starting to come through that program. So I agree that it's academic in nature, but I would disagree that it's kind of out on its own in that case. I think kind of you know, A level or any domestic qualification requires a studiousness and a focus in any particular program.
Yes, great. And Andrew Farmer just texted in actually just to agree with you that the academic rigor, and it is very demanding as a diploma program, but he does say that the holistic nature makes it very rewarding, and the importance given to CAS is a key distinguishing factor. And that kind of tessellates very well with Adele, who's texted in and asked, do you think that the IB gives students more of the necessary skills for studying at uni than when they study A-level? So there's a clear, I said at the start of the show that we'd be looking to draw some parallels between the IB and with A-levels. And yes, with A-levels, you'll take 3, potentially 4 over the 2 years, whereas as you've just articulated for IB, you've got 6 subjects, plus CAS, plus TOK, plus theory of knowledge. So what are your thoughts on that in terms of which of the two do you feel prepare students better for the next steps?
I think kind of... I don't have as much experience given the nature of my career outside of the UK, and obviously my much of my career, or certainly the last 10 years or so, has been dominated by the IB. So I wouldn't like to speak to kind of the specifics of A levels. One of the things that I'm lucky enough to do is I teach in a school where we have 2 kind of institutions post 16, and I run the IB program in one particular institution, and we do have a secondary school and a post-16 program, which is A-level, and that's incredibly attractive to some of our students. I think it depends on the individual students and their kind of needs and desires almost post 18 and to where they're going to go to, because I do think, you know, A level and the specificity and obviously the 350 hours of study that can be put into, you know, perhaps a more specific set of 3 or 4 subjects is useful and incredibly beneficial to some students. I echo the kind of the caller's comment about the idea of the holistic nature of it. You know, anecdotally, I can say that, you know, a lot of my job is talking to university admissions officers and you know, trying to secure those places and trying to get in some cases a recognition of the IB, and the feedback that I've had over my career is that once IB students get to university in their first year, they can often, I had one particular university officer from Yale just kind of say, we get really, really high achieving graduates from all programs, obviously getting into Yale, but she said IB students can just do more.
Yes.
And I think what she means by that is just the idea of the holistic nature of it means that, you know, students have had to focus on the things that they're going to study. So, if they want to be a doctor, then they have to study chemistry and biology at higher level. There's no way around that. But what they also have to do, and what they can demonstrate with a very, very good score in something like maths, or in their, maybe a language that they're learning where they don't necessarily have that propensity, is they can, through a good score, they can kind of demonstrate an engagement with learning, which I'm not sure comes through if you don't necessarily specialize. Speaking personally, I kind of did A levels back in the 90s in the UK, and I did the things that I was good at, and I did history, and I did psychology and economics and English language, and I was very good at writing essays, and I was very good at the humanities subjects, and I feel that now, looking back on my education career, I did miss out on that post-16 need to engage in something like languages, which is ultimately living internationally. It's something I kind of had to engage in later on and learn later on. I also think, a little bit of science or a little bit of mathematics wouldn't necessarily have kind of done me any harm, particularly when I think back to my A levels and struggling with kind of statistics and statistical significance in my A levels. I think if I was going along to a maths class and at the same time, then that kind of holistic nature would have had undoubted benefits to my own understanding.
Yes, great, absolutely, and I in total agreement with that in a way that, particularly the core, I think the core does make a big difference. I understand the kind of the depth and breadth of the academic subjects, but the extended essay, having to write a 4,000-word research paper, before university, is excellent preparation for that. CAS, I think, as well, building those dispositions, those positive dispositions between self-improvement, but also to improving the lives of those around you. And in theory of knowledge, epistemology, one thing that I found when I was teaching theory of knowledge myself is that as soon as I was teaching it for a while, I was then able to actually make the connection myself within my own subject. Whereas I fear perhaps maybe if teachers haven't actually taught theory of knowledge, then perhaps there is a bit of a gap there. And that might be something that we talk about a little bit later when it comes to CPD. I think also what you've just said there was a question I was going to ask actually about, if you've got a very focused, very specific career plan, like I want to be a doctor or I want to be a vet, etc. To what extent, I think you answered it already actually, in the way that it allows you to show better to show what am I trying to say here? To show
a focus.
Thank you. In those subjects, but also building those other kind of knowledge and skills around in the other subjects, I think is very very important. Let's take a news break.
Sorry, just the only thing to add is I think kind of, every post-16 teacher will be able to relate to this. To a certain extent, we're all beholden to a university designate and an entry-level requirement. Mm-hmm. So if you want to be a doctor, then you have to study chemistry and biology. If you want to go and study kind of economics, certainly at Russell Group universities and Oxbridge universities, and certainly the Ivy League in the US, then you've got to study economics, but you've also got to study a higher level maths, because of the requirements of those courses. If you want to study engineering, you're going to have to demonstrate a propensity for physics and mathematics. But going back to what you've just said about the IB core, it allows you to kind of to demonstrate almost a specialism, and I think in a way that maybe A level doesn't, or perhaps the it didn't used to. It allows you to demonstrate an interest in a particular subject area. So you can, if your particular specialism or your particular enthusiasm is something in history, then you can write your extended essay in history as well as studying it. If you're a particular, if you're a scientist, for instance, or you love physics, I had a wonderful student when I was IB coordinator in Houston, who was a very, very good physicist, and he was in my history class as well. And he decided to do his internal assessment, his coursework, on the persecution of physics departments under the Nazi regime in the 1930s. So he had a free rein to choose his coursework topic, and what he was able to do was kind of then, take the thing that he was interested in, which was physics, and then take a look at that within a historical context. Students can also kind of demonstrate engagement engagement through the creativity, activity and service, or the creation of their CAS portfolios. And what I found is that particularly when it comes to the top end universities and those ones that require interviews or the personal statements, I found that the people that really do engage with that core have got so much more to talk about. I think it's a given getting into really, really good universities in the what would be the equivalent of a couple of A's and a B, or in the IB equivalent maybe a 36 points and above score. It almost goes as read that your academic record is an excellent one, and that can be traced back to GCSEs as well. But I think the ones that require interviews and the ones that require for students to be kind of engaging and personable, and also to a certain extent demonstrate their own personality and interest. Those core elements, if they're deployed well, allow them to kind of conduct interviews for application to for a physics course, which will talk about its real world applications or its historical context, or how it's portrayed in English literature or whatever. And I'm not sure whether specialism in 2 or 3 areas will allow that.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's great. Ian, covered again so much. I'd like to cover a few more things as well with you before our time is up. So we just need to go to a quick news break first.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News with Megan Goods.
This is your latest Teachers Talk Radio News. The National Director of Education, Sean Harford, revealed on a recent Teachers Talk radio show that Ofsted's research reviews into subjects are not intended to be used to form judgments during school inspections. Instead, Harford stated on The Late Show this Wednesday that the reviews are the precursor to future reports on the state of the nation, assessing the quality of provision, and are not meant to be used for deep dives. He also assured listeners that schools won't be judged against them. This corroborates the statement from Ofsted that the aim of the reviews is to support and inform those leading the thinking on subject education in our schools. You can listen to the interview in full on the Teachers Talk Radio website. A new survey has revealed the impact the coronavirus pandemic is having on levels of period poverty in the UK. Of the 1,000 participants questioned, over a third stated they had taken time off school because of their period. 28% had missed lessons more than once. 27% had struggled to complete homework, and 26% of those surveyed had felt unable to leave their homes because of their period. More worryingly, 14% said they found it difficult to get hold of sanitary products, an increase of 9% in the 2 years since the survey was last undertaken. The results have led to a call for all schools to provide free sanitary products. The latest figures have been released and reveal that 830,000 students are now in self-isolation across England. This is compared to 471,000 who were isolating as of the 1st of July. That was your latest Teachers Talk Radio News.
Thank you very much, Megan, and welcome back to Teachers Talk Radio. You join me with my guest, Ian McHugh, who has been talking a lot about the International Baccalaureate, specifically the diploma programme. Absolutely fascinating, and I think there's a lot of things coming through on the texts in terms of, people agreeing with the idea that perhaps maybe this holistic approach that the IB is taking certainly does stand students in better stead when it comes to university applications, university interviews. And I think you have tipped the point yourself to that. They may not be studying as much of the specific subject, but those kind of, I guess, one for a better phrase, the softer skills, knowing how to learn, knowing how to communicate, knowing how to think critically, yes, based on acquisition of knowledge, etc., are all things that I think have led the IB to certainly the diploma program to be held in high esteem by many institutions, universities around the world. This third section was just a kind of a covering those acronyms. Yes, most educational institutions do love an acronym, and the IBDP are no stranger to them. But I think we've actually already kind of covered them to a degree anyway. I wondered if you wanted to add anything more. How does CAS, the EE and TOK, how does that enhance the overall educational experience and therefore the lives of the students?
I think it just, further to what I've said before, and anybody who teaches the IB diploma program will be able to hopefully back this up. But just the idea that it enhances the program, and it requires the students to do that little bit more. But I also think it enhances their learning that little bit more. So in something like CAS, they have to undertake real purposeful reflection, and they have to put together a portfolio of evidence related to engagement in creative tasks, in active tasks, and in service opportunities, which, many students are incredibly good at doing those things outside of school, post 16 in the UK and across the world. I think what the IB requires students to do is to kind of say, look, if you're playing football post 16 for your local team, then what are you learning from that? You used to be able to you need to practice your penalties after the week we've had as kind of international Englishmen, but you can think about the training methods and obviously playing for your team and how you might improve the skills there, and if you're regularly engaging with that after every training session and thinking in detail about what actually did you learn from something like that, then that can provide personal challenge. It can provide kind of thoughtful consideration, and particularly over a number of weeks, it can also kind of mean that you can really reflect on the progress that you've made. In TOK, I'm a massive advocate for TOK because I'm a TOK teacher, I'm a TOK coordinator, and ultimately the TOK is something kind of slightly baffling to people sometimes, because it's just made up really of kind of questions. We just pose questions about the nature of knowledge, and about where knowledge comes from, and about how we know what we claim to know. The new specification is very, very good at placing that in a real world context, and ultimately the challenge for students there is to basically to think about where we get our information from, and that includes kind of challenging the textbooks and in some cases the teachers about how they know, and really looking in detail about what's the nature of authority. So you have me telling you something in a particular history lesson. Well, how do I know? Well, I kind of read it in Hugh Kennedy's book on the Abbasid and Fatimid caliphates. Well, how did he know? Because he used primary documents, and he kind of and he's an exceptional historian. And then from there, it's kind of like, well, how do we know that the sources? And so what you're tracing back is all the way to the kind of the real source material, and looking at the issues and the problems and the contradictions, but also looking at the real benefits for that expert nature and things that we need to be mindful of. And then finally, the extended essay essay, as I think I've outlined, it can really enhance a diploma program. It's the student's choice. They can choose what to do. And again, anecdotally, from students who've graduated in the IB diploma programs that I've been involved with or coordinated, we often get those returning students at, like, Christmas break or the October half term in their first year of undergraduates, and they kind of come back to us and say that, in the first term or the first semester, they were expected to write a 2,000 word essay, and that was quite scary for some of their classmates, and they kind of brush it off and say, look, I've written a 4,000 word research project with nothing really to start with. I know how to do kind of full referencing. I know how to kind of set all of this out. I know how to communicate my ideas. I know how to develop an argument because I've been required to do it. And again, they talk about the idea that, I remember one particular student coming back and saying that in their halls of residence, they did like a couple of seminars for the other people in their little wing or in their little block of halls of residence about how to do kind of in-text referencing and stuff. Now, I'm absolutely positive that that's the case across, A-level, and there's some best practice going on across the world in terms of that. But I do think explicitly the extended essay requires students to do that in a way that isn't necessarily the case in a normal coursework or a internal assessment submission.
Just such a cornucopia of opportunity really in the core, isn't there, in terms of self improvement, I think, and doing it at an earlier stage, I think, is that benefit, because you are laying the foundations for future studies, and that kind of, it made me think, actually, Mark J. Solomons has texted in and said he's taught both IB and A levels, and he feels that the IB does prepare students better for the future in terms of its breadth. He's a supporter of the way that the IAs, which is the internal assessments, allow students to go down an independent path early on. And his final point, which which made me think as well, is that the A levels, they offer a narrower curriculum, and students need to work harder to differentiate themselves from each other. Now, I instantly thought that, well, yes, and this is where core has the core of the IB has the upper hand in the way, because it is kind of facilitating skill development and knowledge acquisition and self-reflection, etc., in the ecosystem of the IB. But if A-level students have to differentiate themselves from each other, then they have to go and do those sorts of things almost independently, and perhaps maybe that might be shown to be more proactive, I guess, in trying to grow one's knowledge and understanding about the world and etc. So, what do you think on that point?
I think I take your point. Like I say, I think that there are undoubtedly kind of gifted students in all programs post 16s all across the world, and I do agree that there are that almost the independent nature of students who go out of their way to kind of engage in whatever, a charitable pursuit or sporting excellence or creative projects within programs that don't necessarily require that should be admired and celebrated. The one thing I would say is, I think sometimes, hopefully I get sympathy with this from some of our listeners, but the idea of, post 16, some of our students find it very, very difficult to kind of to blow their own trumpet, to really champion themselves when it comes to university applications. And I think the structures of the IB make it that little bit more explicit. So what we can do is we can say, well, in your personal statement, you can demonstrate in a paragraph or two, what bits of you engage with that you particularly feel like have professionally developed you or personally developed you in your CAS portfolio. What do you think you learned from your extended essay? What about the nature of knowledge in the particular university course that you've applied to is something that you feel that you can talk about and articulate, and whilst I'm absolutely positive that the best students will be able to do that anyway under any program, I do think the IB provides a little bit of that scaffolding to be able to support those and hopefully kind of enable them to put their best foot forward with those applications.
Beautiful, yes, and I hope in the final part we are vastly running out of time, unfortunately, which does mean actually that we may have to have a part 2 at a future date, Ian. But I'm just going to play a quick advert just before we close.
Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers. At Creative Resources, we've been rethinking what a classroom can be. We've created a huge range of more than 2,500 original and exciting resources that span across more than 15 different subject areas. Whether you're looking for primary or secondary level resources, careers options, PSHE, arts, or humanities, Creative Resources have the resources for you. We offer full curriculum packages and unique, challenging escape rooms themed on topics such as Shakespeare, Tudors, and fractions. We have quizzes, task cards, Tarsier puzzles, and lots more. Better still, more than 100 resources can be accessed for free. Just visit our website, www.CRE8TIVEresources.com. You can get 10% off any order you make on our website by using the discount code TTRadio. Creative Resources, made for teachers by teachers.
Thanks very much, sir. So we've just got 5 minutes, actually, just to finish on up there. We haven't really started to talk or go into much depth about things like assessment, which I really wanted to, and CPD, also universities, their approach and attitude to the qualification itself, and also an interesting tweet that I had from somebody regarding access to programs. You know, the fact that a large amount of the schools which offer the IB programs are in fact fee paying. So that's something that I wanted to also kind of dive into, but time unfortunately has gotten the better of us on that one. The other thing to think about is how the IB schools have coped and managed with all of the changes in the last 18 months as well. So Ollie has texted in again, actually, and said about he has supported the EPQ, which is the equivalent of the extended essay for A levels. This is it's optional for A level students. But he says that he can only see this as an acknowledgement that the A level program is lacking to some extent. What do you say to that, Ian?
I can't really talk to the kind of adequacies or inadequacies of the A level, and I certainly don't feel it's my place to do that. As I said, I'm sure there's gifted A level students, and undoubtedly there's gifted A level teachers out there doing the best they can. The one thing I would do is I kind of agree with Ollie. I think a little bit is the idea of kind of that there is undoubtedly an acknowledgement through the EPQ that students need an opportunity to kind of demonstrate something beyond that curriculum. And I think the EPQ is a really good step in the right direction for those students who, you know, again, it can be approached for those who are the most maybe, but it can also be those that want to demonstrate a particular enthusiasm or propensity in a certain area to really demonstrate something that can enhance their educational portfolio. And just one thing I want to kind of pick up on is just that idea of you know, there is a misnomer, I think, that the IB is this kind of private education. Of course, its origins in international schools means it's kind of the early part of it is dominated from that. But I used to teach in the Americas region, and I was in an international school in the Americas, and in the kind of Texas area that I was, then there was. In the IB coordinators network that we have, it was very, very much dominated by what we would call kind of state-funded kind of secondary schools. So in preparation for today, and obviously in reference to that tweet, I took a look, and the information I found from 2017 was that it was a 52-48% split. So yes, private education does make up just over half, but particularly in the Americas and growing in other jurisdictions, I know Poland Poland and Ecuador have made massive strides in this in the past couple of years, then it is growing to kind of to equalize a great deal. So it's important to say it's not just private educations or fee-paying international schools for this. As you mentioned right at the top of the show, there's 100 of my colleagues, IB coordinators all across the UK, and that's growing everywhere.
Yeah, fantastic. Honestly, it's been so enjoyable. This has been my very first show, and I have to admit I was a little bit nervous at the very beginning, but I want to really thank you for the way that you've kind of responded so enthusiastically and so knowledgeably about the diploma program, and I hope it has been of use to our listeners. I'd like to thank the people that have messaged in and tweeted, etc., with questions. I'm hoping that it's been an enjoyable experience enough for you, Ian, that if I were to call upon you again in the future, that you'd be happy to kind of continue this discussion in another show.
Absolutely, and obviously, given the context and given the listenership, then I'm happy to kind of to give outline and specifics in whatever the audience require. Really
beautiful. Well, I hope everybody's enjoyed that. I certainly have. Thank you so much for listening, for tuning in. If you're live or if you're downloading and listening back, it's been an absolute joy. Have yourselves a fantastic day and enjoy the summer.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.